scientists don't know what really causes this phenomenon. So this has been going on for a very long time, but every time it happens, the scientists come up with a new fresh explanation for it.
Welcome back, everybody. Tonight's guest is a paranormal content creator on Instagram that shares her travels to haunted and historical places, along with her keen eye for capturing locations and their magic through photography. She is a paranormal investigator, an author, and Instagram's The Esoteric Heretic. Hilary Opiel, welcome back to Don't Turn Around.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so you've been here before. This is not your first time, but last time you stopped by, Don't Turn Around, you were part of a group, part of Black Beak Paranormal, and you've since headed out on your own. So my first question, as long as it's not in any way a touchy subject, what inspired you to go solo?
I think for both of us, it's more of like a logistical issue, as you know, when you have like a team both trying to find the same time and go to the same place, especially when you have kids, is really
Oh yeah,
hard. So it started becoming very difficult to incorporate one another into Black Beak Paranormal. And it was like,
right.
well, at this point, we'll both just go solo and that's going to be a
Yeah,
little bit easier. So we're still going to investigate together if we get the opportunity, but this kind of gives us more, I would say, artistic freedom
yeah,
for what we want to do. Because even when you're in a group and you have like a group page, and especially because Mallory and I do have different aesthetics, like we see things differently, we like different things, we're into different things, which is really healthy, I think, for any relationship or partnership. But when you're trying to portray that online, sometimes that gets a little tricky. So it was like, oh, I think we're better off doing our own thing and then collaborating when we can.
yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's always better to figure that out earlier rather than later, right? Because I think then it doesn't always lend itself to such an amicable parting of ways, or there's some people tend to feel like a little resentment that they're kind of being overruled creatively or whatnot. But it's fantastic to hear that you guys will still collaborate while exploring your own, as you said, aesthetic and that part of the journey on your own, which really, is really a big part of it. And I think in having a quote unquote team, you need to at least have a similar vibe, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
To
and
to make it really work.
the paranormal is so nuanced. You can have two people who are interested in it, but they get completely different things out of it and they're doing it
Yeah.
for different reasons. And I think even just experiencing the paranormal can be
Yeah.
very different. And I think for Mallory and I particularly, we have never really experienced the same things. And sometimes then trying to convey that as a group, it gets hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, understood, understood. And like I said, it sounds like you guys have really figured it out, how you'll collaborate in the future. And then you have the opportunity to, as cheesy as it sounds, really kind of spread your wings. And I think when you guys do come together for when you go on investigations in the future, I think that's really going to add to it all. Because if I recall, when you guys got together as Black Beak Paranormal, it was still the paranormal and exploring the paranormal and being investigators was pretty new for both of you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
And
new.
so I think that time to kind of figure out also where you fit into it and what your journey looks like is very important. You
It's
need that time.
it's so complicated because I feel like, especially online, because, and I think we talked about, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Putting things on a social media platform.
Mhm.
And that, my biggest thing is I don't want anything kind of dictating to me what I want or should be doing. So I feel like with social media, especially when you're on a team and you feel like you kind of owe somebody something for it too,
Yeah.
your own like personal goals can get convoluted in that. So kind of
Yeah.
being on your own, I would recommend it to a lot of people. I think you can have like a generic team, but if you're trying to go for like big social media platform, that's really hard to pull off as a team.
And I think that's a great point. And I think a lot of people, at least when they're getting into it and they see what they see through, like you said, social media of teams, through all the shows of teams, it's very team centric. And I think it creates, I don't want to say an inaccurate picture, but it only shows you that side of it when the synergy is completely there.
Yeah.
And just through my discussions with people, it's not always like that right out of the gate. And
Hmm.
you don't always find that synergy. And you also get into this realm of, oh, I feel, am I pushing them into this direction? And like you said, it becomes complicated and it kind of convolutes things. And the paranormal is already complicated
It
enough.
is. And I hate too when you're like, I can do this and they can't. So that means if I do it, like I'm leaving them out. I don't know.
Mhm.
That's like a weird thing too with team stuff. And I feel like you get that with any collaboration in your life, just doing
Oh, yeah.
parent stuff. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, can you do this on this date? And it's like, that date doesn't work for me. How about this
Hmm.
date? And it's like,
Hmm.
that doesn't work for me. I have a birthday party at this time. And it's like, oh my God, like, by the time you find a date that works for both of you, it's like 3 months out. And you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Especially with younger kids. Those days aren't too far behind me, but I could not imagine doing what I'm doing now, with my partner T and the team we've kind of put together with younger kids, with the schedules, with having to have someone home with the kids so we can go
Yeah.
out. Because now, when the kids are with us, we just take them on the investigation. So,
I
so
bring my daughter
which is
to a lot. And sometimes I feel guilty about it because
yeah,
she'll be like, where are we going, mommy? And I'm like, Centralia. And she'll be like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's this place. It's no one's there. It's abandoned. And then she like brought it up the other day. She's like, can we go back to that place with like
yeah,
nothing there? And I was like, if you really want to, like,
yeah, yeah.
thought maybe I was being an irresponsible parent bringing you, but okay.
And that brings up a good point. And I wasn't even going to go in this direction tonight, but I think it's absolutely worthwhile discussing is quote unquote being a paranormal parent, right? Being a parent that's into exploring the unexplained. It's an important part of your life. And so it's how you identify, at least in part, because of course, as humans, we are complicated. We are into a lot of different things, but at least for me, it's become a big part of my life. And it was there was some uncertainty when I said, "Well, I'm gonna start involving the whole family in this a little bit. I hope it's not gonna freak them out or scar them in any way." And it's actually been a really amazing experience for us to bond with our kids, and they're old enough now that they can actively participate in investigations, but at the same time, I think it's really neat and interesting that you take your daughter with you at this stage. How old is she now?
She's 4. She'll be
She's
5 in
4.
November. Like you said, I think bonding's bonding, right? And it's not
Right.
like
Exactly.
so many of the paranormal things that you bring your children on, there's a lot of history that they're learning. They're learning
Yeah.
about community. I mean, for her, I bring her to a lot of local things so she gets to
Yeah.
learn about local history. And it's all really relevant to who we are now. So
Yeah.
I think there's some really important stuff happening bringing your kids to these things and explaining to them why you want to go, why it's important, why we need to think about like how it shaped the things that we do now, because so many of the things that we consider haunting, something happened that
Right.
shouldn't have happened. And we
Right.
learned from that. And
Right.
how are we going to learn from it if we no longer talk about that history or teach that
Yeah.
history to our children? And it is fun. Like we get to go places, we talk the whole time, we're not on our phones. And like,
Yeah.
I do feel like it's easy to give your kid a phone, but if you can find something where you can interact with them and I mean, it really doesn't matter what it is, so long as you're having that one-on-one time and you're like
Yeah.
seeing them and you're talking to them and she loves it. Not all the time though. There's sometimes, because sometimes there's a lot of walking involved and
Yeah.
she's got those
Oh
little
yeah.
legs. So she's like, Mommy, I'm tired. And it's like, I just want to go into like one more building. And then I
Yeah.
feel bad and I'm like, yeah, all right, we should go. You're hitting your point.
And let me tell you, and the I'm chuckling because my daughter would probably murder me. My kids are a little older; they're teenagers now. And for Father's Day, we went out to oh my gosh, we went out to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia,
Oh,
which
it's
is
wonderful.
got an amazing history out there, and is a spooky haunted place in its own right. And we all, myself, my wife, and my other daughter, we kind of dressed for being out in nature and kind of wearing comfortable clothes. And my other daughter, who, she's into fashion, she likes to dress it up a little bit, definitely did not wear the best outfit for
It's
being
happened to
out and
me.
walking around. Yeah. Yes. And so she was, by the end, she was getting very uncomfortable, but what a trooper. She didn't complain, but you
Oh,
could see
wow.
it on her. You could see it on her face
Yeah.
that she was running out of gas, and she was uncomfortable in her clothes. And so I pulled the plug. But again, it's about, I think you can be successful integrating your family and your kids into these paranormal adventures so long as you've set the proper expectations for them, you've got the proper expectations set for yourself, and then you're just aware of everybody's limits, right? And I think it's a pretty simple equation. And as long as you're considering that, as you said, it can be a very incredible bonding experience, learning about history, which will always broaden perspective. But then the other part of it I really like too is, because it's not how I grew up with, the paranormal was more of a scary thing.
Hmm.
And now, as I'm exploring it as an adult, I'm realizing, okay, there are aspects of it that can absolutely be scary as all get out. But as a whole, the bigger part of it is not so scary. And so demystifying that for my girls has been amazing. And you taking this opportunity to do this at an earlier age for your daughter, I think is really going to kind of open her possibilities as she's growing up. And I think she's going to see the world through a much bigger lens.
I think in many ways, much to my husband's chagrin sometimes though, where it's like, you did what? But I think like both demystifying and destigmatizing a lot of it because
Right.
so much has been taboo. I mean, I feel like people forget that in the 80s and 90s, because I had a mom who was really into esoteric things or
Yeah.
I want to say occult things, but I didn't think about it that way because I thought of it
Right.
more as spiritual things. And the shame that you would get if your friends found out and they were in these like really uptight, strict Christian households, you
Yeah.
were the demon because your mom read tarot cards. So
Right.
I like
Right.
kind of taking that away from her so she doesn't have that attitude. And we're so open, we're so accepting. Like, if you're very religious, I'm more than happy to embrace that for you. But
Yeah.
if you're not, like, I would never push any of my own spirituality on you. And I feel like
Right.
she's growing up like that. And there's a lot that you can learn from one another, whether you're very spiritual, you're very religious, or you're atheist. Like, talk
Right.
to each other, find out
Yeah.
why, see where they got that idea from.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is too, I think there's this false kind of perception that to be atheist means that you're a person without faith. And
Hmm.
I think faith and then recognition of like a overall deity or whatever, I think the two are not exclusive.
Yeah.
You can certainly have faith, and you can be guided by that faith, and you could find comfort in that faith. It doesn't necessarily have to be in God or Buddha or whatever. And I think that's an important message. Absolutely. And I think a lot of this exploration of the paranormal and of the esoteric, a lot of it is faith based.
Yeah.
in the sense, yeah, it's not faith based necessarily in any of the gods, but it is certainly when you are making that choice to believe in something that you cannot explain, that you cannot maybe reach out and touch, but you're making the choice to believe that there is something there. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of faith,
You have to put yourself
non
out there
poetically
for
put.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
I think
Yeah, you do.
sometimes too, you might one of the like common threads I think that you'll get with people who are into this is I didn't believe, but something happened to me and it forced me to believe. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have a choice after it happened. And then I had to kind of discomfort creates change. Like nobody likes to be uncomfortable, but it's like what you need in order to like improve yourself in different ways.
Yes.
Because if
Yes.
there's no discomfort, you're not going to do anything to like change your situation. So sometimes you
Absolutely.
got to get a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I mean, that is really become a mantra of mine, and it applies to all aspects of your life. Is sometimes you have to learn to sit with that discomfort, and it's
Yeah,
going to be uncomfortable, but then the discomfort is going to pass, and whether you like it or not, you're going to grow in some way from sitting through that discomfort. And discomfort does not mean does not mean the outcome will be negative. Even if that discomfort is coming from a negative place, the outcome doesn't have to be a negative.
definitely.
So let's, man, I mean, we could talk about this topic all night, and
I
I would
know.
love to. I would love to. But just to refresh my listeners, so moment, that moment of discomfort for you, that kind of put your beliefs onto a different path, that happened at Fort Mifflin.
Fort Mifflin, I think, was my first pretty I don't have a choice but to accept that I've experienced something that I can't explain. And that was a
Yeah.
catalyst to really put me on the path of being like, well, I can't explain it. I don't know if it was good or bad, but I no longer can accept my worldview. Like you have these kind of theories, these working theories in your head of
Mhm.
what life is, what you're doing here, what's going on. And then something comes and it railroads you, and you're like, whoa, I'm wrong. I don't know where I'm wrong. I don't know how I'm wrong, but I'm definitely wrong. And I have to accept it. And I have to like figure out what the hell is going on here. So, yeah, Fort Mifflin did that for me. And then I think throughout doing this, having different experiences, that's the beauty of it, is it's not going to be one thing. I think when we talk about
Mhm.
paranormal activity or hauntings, it can be they're not all the same. There could be different things happening.
Yeah.
So I think different things happen to you, and your explanation or your theory on what happened the first time isn't the same one for what happened the second time. And that's
Yeah.
weird too, where you're like, oh, I got to go back to the books. I got to figure out now
Right.
what happened. But it's a really beautiful experience as an adult when like the magic of like childhood has kind of been, the veil's been taken off and nothing
Yeah.
really seems kind of fantastical anymore.
Yeah.
So it's neat to experience these things where you're like, wait, there kind of is still a little bit of magic in life itself. And I can figure it out, or not figure it out, but I can experience it.
Right. You can experience it, and you can contemplate it through the lens of life experience, right? Through everything
Mhm.
you've experienced up to this point, you can you can view this whatever's happened in a different way that you couldn't necessarily as a young person, but it's still magic. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of magic out there. So the Fort Mifflin experience, that was a disembodied voice, right? You right by you when you were in one of the what do you call them? Casemates?
Yeah, Casemates. It was Casemate 5, and we asked a question, and at that point, I would say we were the obnoxious people on a public investigation that thinks it's all a joke, and we're like, this is silly. Like, um, we're just gonna ask some questions, and like, what an experience to have, especially when you no longer have felt fear from it. You're you have no guard up anymore. And I think that's key in a lot of this is like your guard isn't
Yeah.
up, your walls aren't up, you're kind of like open to experiencing something because you're no longer like blocked. And I think too at that point we weren't recording, we had nothing like on us. And I do think we're not meant to really document a lot of what we're experiencing through technology because
Yeah.
technology is a human made thing, and we might be talking about things that aren't like within our like corporal reality, so they're not
Right.
able to get captured a lot, or they don't want to. I don't know the answer to that, but we were virgins to all of it, and we really had it handed to us with the disembodied voice where we were both like, holy crap, I never
Yeah.
in my life expected that to happen. And that was a beautiful moment to experience with someone else, because it's one thing when you experience the paranormal solo and you kind of have no one to verify your account. Like, so you don't know, maybe you did hear something and it wasn't it, or you hallucinated. But I think to experience something with somebody else and have them say yes, and you both react, that's a really incredible moment because you
Yeah.
are like, oh my God, it really happened because it happened to you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that therein lies the value of going out with others, right?
mhm.
When you actually are going out to investigate. And I love to go out solo. It's a very different experience, right? Being out on your own. And then when you go out with others, then you have that opportunity to kind of corroborate what's going on.
Yeah,
And so it's, I think both experiences are beautiful in their own way. But like you said, for that moment and that astounding moment where had you been alone, you may have just simply, just as is our instinct to justify what you experienced in some explainable way. But the moment someone else experiencing the same thing, you can't really do that.
no, it takes it away from you. And I think it's a powerful thing. And you have that shared experience, you can talk about it with them. They're as invested into it as you are, that's like you both have this really incredible moment that you experience together, and it's something that you both talk about and you bonded over. So I love group investigations for that. I think anytime I have experienced something like quite paranormal, it has been in a group. And I wonder
Yeah,
if, because when I'm solo, especially being like a female, I am so much more guarded and like
of course.
alert and aware. It makes me wonder if I'll never really experience something paranormal when I'm alone, because I'm like, please don't. I don't have the capacity right now to like handle a haunting while I'm solo out in the woods. Like, I'm gonna think someone's murdering me.
Well, that's a really good point, and I that you raise. I think more so, as a female being out in the woods all
Yeah,
alone, but also I think as anyone being out in the woods all alone, you're just naturally going to be in that self-preservation mode, right? So, like you
mhm,
said, more of those blockades are going to be up. So that's an interesting point. And I think even as you raise it, I feel like while I've experienced some things solo, I think when I'm with a group, I am less concerned about anything else you might worry about when you're out on your own. For me, sometimes
yeah,
it's just if I'm in a park and people are going to be looking at me like, what is this weird guy doing here? Or I'm at a park and it's getting
same.
dark and the rangers are going to come through and be like, you need to get out of here. It's so it's complicated. But I am that weird guy out there with like blinking lights and a backpack.
I feel like I'm afraid you're afraid of like the authorities being like, sir, you can't. And like I tell my husband, I think that's one of the only benefits of being like a female out is you can play the like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Is this private property, officer? I didn't know. I was picking some wildflowers by the side of the road. Like please, I'm not gonna get in trouble.
Totally. Oh, totally. Like last week, I went out for the first time in probably a year to where I got started in solo with my solo stuff, and this is at a local battlefield. It's Balls Bluff Battlefield, and it was dark, and I was coming back, and I just lost my train of thought. All right. moving along. So we briefly, last time we talked, touched on Gettysburg, which has become one of our absolute favorite places to go visit.
Love
And I know that
Gettysburg.
you've spent some time in Gettysburg, and we didn't have a chance to talk about any of your experiences. So I just want to sit back and hear you tell me about how you experienced Gettysburg and what makes Gettysburg such a magical spot for you.
I I love Gettysburg. I feel like Gettysburg has a lot to offer. I think the Civil War in general, sorry, these cats, they're just one by one
They're fine.
coming um,
They're fine.
at the Civil War was any Civil War is such a personal fight. It's such a personal war. You can be fighting against brothers, cousins, the whole like nation against nation. So I think you have a lot of emotion and energy fused into these like really uh, significant moments. And we went to Devil's Den when we were in Gettysburg. We kind of went all over, but the battlefield that we chose
Yeah.
to go to was Devil's Den. And I have a lot of theories about water and stone, especially limestone. And that's a very rocky limestone type feature. And it happened to be raining. And I talk about in my one reel that I did about how limestone, like oil or like coal that produces energy, is made up of organic material. So I really wonder at the possibility of limestone when like let's say activated having the potential to like be a conductor for energy like
Yeah.
other
Which, and I
organic
got to say,
material.
yeah, your post did teach me something because I did not realize that limestone was primarily composed of organic material. I had no idea.
I don't think I did either until I went to Crystal Caves and had to watch this like video from the 1970s, like you'd watch in
Yes.
elementary school about rock formation, which is one of the funny things about investigating is you end up in these places that make you watch these videos that you'd watch only in elementary school where you're like, oh,
Right.
that's actually pretty good. But yeah, it's made up of organic material, and I think it's significant. I think there's something going on there, and maybe what's going on isn't what we
Yeah.
think is going on. Maybe it's not paranormal at all. Maybe it's creating some kind of hallucinogen for ourselves. Who knows? But something's
Hmm.
happening because there seems to be like a pattern, at least enough to show up of rain being some kind of conduit and like limestone like showing up in hauntings. But Devil's Den had both that day because it was raining, it was
Yeah.
dreary, made for the perfect backdrop, but like going around in the rain is horrible. But as a paranormal investigator, you're like, it's good. I didn't want to get wet today, but like I'll just go with it. But
I'm
we're
all in.
yeah, we're walking up, and there's I want to call it an alcove. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's I'm sure if you're familiar with Devil's Den, you'll know what I'm talking
Hmm.
about. But it's a rock formation with like a tunnel, and you can see out the other side. And I looked in it, and
Yes. Yeah. So kind
I
of like where you
saw.
come up that slope, and then there's that like
Mhm.
kind of off to your left. There's that kind of a crevice almost, and it opens up a little bit, but it's pretty narrow in there.
Someone could fit in there. And
Yeah.
I walked past it and I looked and I saw someone. I saw a soldier and I was looking. It was one of those moments where like you stop because I'm like, this, I can't be like, this doesn't happen. And I went to take a picture and I'm looking in my like camera at the screen in my camera and I'm looking up and I can see somebody, but in the camera picture there's no one there on the box. And
Wow.
I was like, oh. And then I had just that practical moment of being like, I can't capture this. This isn't going to come out in a picture. No one's ever going to believe me. Like it's here. It's in front of me. And I have to say, I didn't think it was a ghost. It wasn't a moment of being like, this is a haunting. And it took me a while because we're new to this. We're like, I said to Mallory, I go, I know we're doing this and we're looking for like ghosts. But I don't think that was a ghost. That to me, it felt like I had a time slip. I'm like, I feel like I saw a past image. Like I was walking and like my view became a moment in time, like there, like a time slip. That's the only way to
Yeah.
describe it. And I
Yeah.
don't know if at that moment they saw me or what happened, but I was like, and then I started, reading about like psychometry and time slips and all of these kind of like moments of basically what would be like a clairvoyant psychic moment of you seeing something. And
Right.
it could be that, but to me, it really felt like it had nothing to do with me and my abilities. I was just at the right place at the right time. And I saw an image of the past, like a significant moment. One of the people on TV, the like paranormal celebrities, Dave Schrader, talks about how
Yep.
he thinks
I
that the
love Dave. I
times.
think he's
Oh, he's
charming.
so interesting. Yeah, he's a brilliant mind, and I love the way that he kind of thinks about it. And he said that
Yeah.
he thinks that we might have moments in time that are layered on each other. Like
Yeah.
1967 is right on top of 2022, or 2016 was right on top of
Right.
like 1454. And we're meant to have the moments, they're significant, they're meant to teach us something that we're supposed to know at that moment. So it's not as random as we think, or maybe it is, but he said there's a
Yeah.
possibility that it's purposely layered because we're supposed to remember or think about something at that time, at that moment, that'll teach us something in this
Mm.
time that'll help us for the future. It's very interstellar because I think about how, like, did you ever watch
Yes.
Interstellar? And that, like, the only, like,
I yes,
it's a
love that
terrific
movie. My
movie.
my older daughter and I have bonded in a serious way over that movie. Yeah, it's a
It's a great,
fantastic film.
great movie. And it is like, is it random or is it orchestrated?
Right.
Is there a bigger plan in trying to get us to understand certain things so that we are better, that our humanity does evolve? I don't know, but for
Right.
me in Gettysburg, that's what happened to me. And it took me a while to even be able to articulate it, to find the words,
Yeah.
because I didn't have that in my word bank to describe what happened. I just kind of, I went pale because Mallory's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't think so. I don't I don't know what just
Yeah.
happened. But I don't think I'm okay." Oh god, this cat is like biting now. So I don't know why
Pay
I do
attention
this.
to me.
Yeah, this is the one that's
Like,
biting.
now
She's a
you've
little
got the spotlight,
crazy.
kitty. All right.
Yeah, I love her, but she's terrible.
That's
But
fine.
yeah, I mean, that was incredible. It's never happened again. I wish it would, because I have to say that's my favorite paranormal experience I've ever had. There was something just so cool about it.
And so let me ask you, in that moment, so you look over, you see this soldier. It's raining. Was it so I've got a series of questions here. Question number 1, was it raining around the soldier? And it's okay if you don't remember, but I'm gonna ask you to kinda, like, sit back and
I
just
think from what
go
I
back.
remember, he had water beneath his feet. I That's a
Okay.
weird thing to like say and remember, but I want to say I can remember there being like a puddle.
Okay.
Maybe that is
And
significant.
did
Maybe
his
him
uniform look
touching
wet?
water. Yes.
Yeah.
What did his uniform look like?
Int
So,
Oh, did his uniform look wet?
no, I don't think so.
No. Interesting. And did you what was going on with your other senses in that moment? Did you smell anything? Did you feel a shift in temperature? Was it warmer? Was it cooler? Did you hear anything?
I want to say if any of that happened, I was too much in shock to take any kind
Yeah.
of register of like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. I was too much in shock to really kind of like
Yeah.
collect it. it
Yeah,
disbelief
and
and
that's
shock.
yeah, and that's totally understandable. I think there's a when these unexpected, astounding moments happen, there's got to be. I mean, there is because of just our chemistry. There's a physiological reaction happening in some part to kind of protect us, and it's probably going to limit some of your other inputs as everything else is kind of lighting up in your brain when you're experiencing this. And let's face it, too. I mean, if you think that you're kind of, let's say you are experiencing a time slip. Maybe there is some other sensory component in our biological brain, some other component that was activated, right? Some means, some sensory interpretation part of our brain that maybe is the what we say they use what 1% of our brain. Maybe this was like that 2%. And so to compensate for this part of your brain to be able to interpret this input, it had to subdue other parts of your brain to be able to really see what was going on.
And
And that was total spitballing.
no, and I like that. I just feel like I wouldn't know because of just being in
Yeah,
shock. And I almost want to say, like,
yeah,
everything about he seemed corporal enough, but if I could use the term like muted, it's like it was like
yeah,
a muted kind of incident where I was enough
yeah,
aware to know that it wasn't someone actually there. I wasn't like alarmed of being like, there's someone else here, we're alone, there's a man, danger. Like, there's enough aware where you're
right,
like, whatever I'm seeing is not actually there. Like, I'd say muted. There's like a
yeah,
mute on whatever is like coming
right,
through. But I think because it was my first time, and that was only about, I want to say we did Fort Mifflin in like end of June or July, and that was November. So we'd only been doing that for about 3 or 4 months. And I had no expectations of having something like that happen to me. I was still in that kind of, I'm not sure if any of this is real mindset where you're
right,
like, I think
yeah,
once you experience something, it almost becomes a challenge to see if you can replicate that from happening again.
right, of
But
course,
you don't believe it will. So when it does, and I don't think the shock value will ever go away from me. And I kind of like that. I feel like there's a part of this where I
yeah,
like someone had messaged me the other day about doing somewhere that's supposed to be very scary. And I was like, good. I haven't had a good scare in a while, and I would really enjoy that. And then it's like, what's wrong with me that I'm
yeah.
like looking
No,
to be really freaked out by something? But it takes a lot, I think, to get me.
yeah, but I think there's that. I mean, it is thrilling in a way, but also it just really, when you have that moment, it just really makes you so aware of like your own life and that you're part of this huge, just cosmic machine, and it's just that is thrilling. If that makes sense. It's not so much about being scared or I mean, that's a component, but being scared is just this reaction to this just intense kind of input that your brain and body are not necessarily configured to comprehend, right?
Yeah, and
But I think over time we do. Yeah.
you acclimate, definitely. You get a little more used to it. I love the idea with all of it though. And anytime something happens, especially if it's something you hadn't experienced before or even thought of, I love the idea that we don't know everything. And I tell my husband a lot, you know, 100 years ago, we were wrong about a lot of things. And 100 years from
Yeah.
now, we're going to find out a lot of things that we were wrong about. And there are things that are going to come up where it's like, I can't believe we did that, or I can't believe we thought that. And I kind of
Right. I
can't
can't
wait
really
to
believe that.
find out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all the time.
Yeah. It's
So
exciting.
it is exciting, and I think though it really kind of humbles you because you have to accept that you don't have all the answers and you might not be right, and there's some truth that you hold that's just not true, and you're gonna find out, and it's gonna rock your world. And I'm just I'm excited
Yeah.
about it. Like I kind of
Yeah.
like
So
people's
hold on.
get
So just hold
ready.
on and enjoy the ride. Get ready and enjoy the
Yeah.
ride.
There's a lot out there, but I think when you do this and there's a part of getting older where there's a lot of stagnation, and I think it can lead to depression.
Hmm.
I think
Oh yeah.
having that mindset of just intellectual curiosity in general, you can't go wrong. Even if it's not doing the paranormal, but you're like, I'd like to take up archery or pottery sounds
Yes.
great. Like, keep
Yeah.
learning, keep doing things. Like,
Yes.
don't limit yourself,
Yeah.
just keep trying. Like, there's so many things that are interesting. And I'm kind of baffled when people are like, I'm so bored. And I'm like, read a book, pick up a new hobby. Like
Yeah.
there's so much to entertain yourself with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. So before we get to the don't turn around question,
Yeah.
I have to hear a little bit about Centralia because that has been on my list for because I've got my wife into this. She initially got into it through kind of photography, but now she's into the paranormal aspect of it. And she shared with me about Centralia maybe, gosh, a year ago or so. And so since then, I've been super intrigued. I really want to get out there. I haven't spoken to anyone who has been there. So you're the first person that I have a chance to talk to that's actually been there. So lay it on
Okay.
me.
I I don't want to say this, but I'm gonna tell you it's a little bit anticlimactic because there's not a lot left. They covered up the graffiti highway,
Yeah.
so that's gone. It's kind of difficult to navigate. There's only a few houses left, and they're pretty like normal. The people are normal. It's definitely worth going to and seeing. It's pretty cool. I think it gets vandalized quite a bit, unfortunately. Like there used to be a
Yeah.
Centralia sign, someone took it, like which is frustrating because it's not that far from me. It's about an hour away. So which I live in the middle of the woods, so like an hour away is close to me.
It's close.
Everything
Yeah.
is
I mean, that's close. Honestly, that's close.
it's not bad.
If you don't
I've
have to
been there.
stop to go to the bathroom, that's close.
It's exactly. I can get there and be back before like lunch.
One trip.
It's kind of a rite of passage around the area. If you're local, everybody at some point goes and checks it out. My husband's been there, his brothers go quadding up there. It's rural. Like and it's just
Yeah.
not that big. We're not talking about a huge area. Something I hadn't realized though is that the town right next to Centralia is called Ashland. They named it that before Centralia started burning. Talk about like
That's
weird,
fascinating.
yeah, like some kind of like what do they call it? Like self prophecy or like
Yeah. There's got to be a word or a combination of words for that. That's really
yeah,
interesting. It's not a
but it,
I mean, it's a synchronicity, but it's not because it's happened at different times. I mean,
yeah,
that's interesting.
it's
Yeah.
like self-prophesizing where you're going through it and it was so interesting. I never heard that. I didn't know that. I've read a lot about Centralia, I've been there, but no one's ever pointed out that the town right next to it is Ashland. So I'm like, maybe it got named that after this disaster happened. That's not true. It was named that before any of this happened. So I think about
Wow.
it like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like you name a town Ashland right next to like all this mining, it's gonna have ashes that come down on it, especially with like the whole
Yeah.
Silent
Oh
Hill
yeah.
kind of but yeah, there's not a lot going on with it. I feel bad for I talked to my husband about this. The history of Centralia, the people that were there, the government claimed eminent domain on their properties. They tried to give them
Yes.
like money to leave, and people fought the court, and they're there. And I said to my husband, well, that's unfortunate though, because they're never going to be able to pass that house and that property down to their children. So there's like no value in it.
Right.
Like, and there's something about even if inherited wealth is as little as like a house that your grandparents owned,
Yeah.
that really helps build your family up. That's not nothing that I just feel like it put a lot of families back. Uh, and that makes me like sad where I'm like, oh, you have like hardworking
Yeah.
people that worked really hard for their houses, and this disaster happens that's out of their control, and they're the ones that suffer for it. But I can't imagine,
Yeah.
it's very poisonous there. It's very toxic. There's
Yeah. Of
the
course.
fumes that are coming up, and they've just been living there for like 50 years, like nothing's happening, and
Yeah.
it's like I don't. So yeah, I no one's ever actually died in Centralia either. So
Right.
I think that's an interesting part of it. They've had
But
disasters, but the actual fire, no one's died. People have fallen in, but they haven't died. They've
yeah.
gotten pulled back out.
And I think too, there's a spot here in Maryland that we like to visit. It's called Daniels, Maryland. And as far as we've been able to find, there were no deaths there, but it was the kind of situation where it was a town that built up around a textile mill. They originally made canvas for tents used in the Civil War. And it was a textile town while it was a town. And then another company came in and then decided, okay, we have all these tenement houses for the workers, but we're not going to support your housing anymore. We're kicking you out. And so basically, they forced many people to move out. Like
Yeah.
Centralia, some people refused to leave until in the 70s, Hurricane Agnes came through and pretty much wiped out the whole town. And then everyone had to leave at that point. But I still think when we have these places, these a lot of people will a big part of their identity. We talked about identity earlier. For many folks, is defined by our home, and by our
Mhm.
town, and by those places that we live in, and to be told or be to be forcibly uprooted is going to involve a lot of very powerful emotions. And I wonder, in places like this, because of that, are there echoes of these families, of these people? Do those echoes linger there? And did you experience anything, even just vibes, while you were there? I know you said you went with your daughter.
I did. I went with my daughter, and I had previously gone with my husband. It's eerie. It's
Hmm.
impossible to
Yeah.
not feel like, I would describe it as like a breath held. It's like a pause.
Yes.
There's a
Yes. Hmm.
a pause
Hmm.
on life there. Uh,
Yeah.
and you can feel it, and you can feel the wrongness of walking around, like your movement in the area feels wrong because it's been paused, it's been hushed. So you
Right.
feel very much like an intruder, and it's very uncomfortable. You don't want to spend a lot of time there. There's this
Yeah.
feeling of like, you need to get out, you don't belong here,
Yeah.
you're trespassing. um and that's palpable, and that could just be, that could be a personal thing, because I don't know
Yeah.
if my own sensitivity to things makes me feel that way. But even when you're there, I would say, if you ever see like a picture that I've taken there, there's something about the background that seems like there's a wrongness to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say when you go, you'll feel it, like a breath held in, like
Yeah.
a pause, and like a, just so you shouldn't be there. I don't think
And
anyone goes there and wants to stay, except for
and
the
I
families that
wonder
refuse.
in these places. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And I wonder in these places where there is that sense of you're waiting for the universe to exhale and keep moving, if there is on some level, this kind of intrinsic pause almost, or like a hitch step in reality. And I wonder if that draws other energies to it just because there's this slight imbalance, right? That's localized kind of imbalance in whatever the fabric of space or time that's a catalyst for experiences or draws other energies to it. We've experienced a lot of strange stuff in Daniels. I've had other experiences at other abandoned places where people didn't die. The town just dried up and they left. But
Mhm.
again, it's that sense of like, it just feels like it's, like you said, it's paused, the breath is held. And I just wonder if that sense that we're feeling that we put into those words, there's more kind of beneath that sense that ties into sort of the threads of reality and space and time.
I think I talk a lot. like we've said, I think the idea of a haunting is so nuanced because it can be so many different things
Mm-hmm.
anywhere.
Yeah.
But I always think about some hauntings or energies, like we spill a stain on a carpet and it stays there, but like our energy and moments can like stain the atmosphere of somewhere permanently where
Yeah.
you might not see it, but in certain lights you can't miss it. You know where the red wine
Right.
was, even though
Yeah.
you tried to
Yes.
bleach it, it's there. And I think about with towns like Centralia that there's that stain, that energy stain
Yes.
that's kind of left there. And then specifically with Centralia, I think the earth remembers. And when you have this catastrophe and it's you hurt the earth, and the earth is this whole living thing. It's its
Yeah.
whole living organism. And I think when you create a wound like that, a really deep, permanent wound, you're going to feel that too. Like you can't help but be receptive and respondent to earth and areas that you're in that have had like a lot of pollution or damage, or people
Yeah.
haven't been like kind to it.
Yeah.
And I think with Centralia, it's multiple things. And I think you can feel the poison in the earth where it's like something's wrong here, and we're responsible, and like Mother Nature knows who did it. Like we did it again.
That's a fascinating point, and I think that's can be a topic for a whole other episode because I want to
Yeah.
explore that a little bit with you. But we're nearing the end here, so it's time.
Okay.
I I don't know if you remember the "Don't turn around" question
Yes.
from. Okay, so I'm just gonna
Mhm.
lead into it.
Okay.
Just gonna flat out ask you before we wrap up here. So, Hilary, so glad you've come back to join the show tonight. And
Thank
I
you
know
for
I've asked you
having
this once already, but of course, but I always like to check back in on this one. So, Hilary, do you turn around?
Yes, because I have to know. I think it's why we're all here, right? I think we all turn around because if we didn't, we're gonna think about what was there and what we might have missed for the rest of our
Yeah,
lives. So yeah, the turnaround for
absolutely.
better or worse.
Beautiful. Great answer. Hilary, let folks know where they can find what you're doing out there, where you're traveling, the history, because I know you do a great job sharing that history on your social media. So, how can folks find you?
Thank you. Just on Instagram. I'm not a very God, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not very loud, so I'm just on Instagram. I just, as the esoteric heretic, I probably won't be on any other platforms besides doing like really nice podcasts like this and getting to talk with people. But Instagram is good for me. But if I ever do anything more, I'll link it up on there.
Sounds good. So, folks, let Hilary be that quiet, informative voice for you out there. Go find her on Instagram. I will have it linked in the show notes. Hilary, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This has been a great conversation. I'll think about it for the next few weeks, and what I wish I
Yeah.
will have other points that come up where it's like, and I should have talked about that too.
Write them down because we'll do this again. Write them when
Okay,
they pop in your head. Just jot them in your notes on your phone.
okay,
All right,
that's
Hilary,
good.
thank you so much.
Yeah, have a good
All
night.
right.
We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon.